Good, Art? Yeah, all right. My name is Devin and this is Dan Pixley, and we both run the Milk the Funk website and also the Facebook group. We kind of specialize in alternative fermentation beers, mixed cultures, kettle souring, long souring, anything to do with just basic straight Saccharomyces beers. So when we talk about quick turnaround sour beers, we got to think about what are the goals that we're setting out to achieve. So one of the things we want to do is create a complex and clean sour beer in a short amount of time. I'm sure everyone's kind of had the feedy, nasty kettle sour beer before that kind of tarnishes, I think, this style of beer. Another goal is that we want to be able to offer sour beer more often and year-round to kind of bring something new to our customers. And I think that kind of goes along under this number 5 of you can kind of think of it as maybe this is an opportunity to replace an underperforming brand. So if you brew a lot of styles of beer, there may be one brand that you have that just doesn't do very well. And these beers offer a solution to that. It's more quick turnaround, so you're not wasting a lot of time, and then you can offer it to your customers. Also, with your wider variety, you can kind of get in more of a market share. Like I find that a lot of wine drinkers and female drinkers kind of gravitate towards the sour beer, so maybe your IPAs don't fill that market, so you can kind of push it with these. And also with the quicker turnarounds, you can be hyper experimental. So you can try out new yeast, new bacteria blends, new bread blends, new fruiting methods, coffee. Since your turnaround is so fast, it lets you play with it before you move into something like a long-aged sour. So what are not our goals? These are not our goals. We're not trying to make a long-aged beer or give a customer an impression that this is what we're making. I think that's a mistake a lot of brewers are making now, is they're trying to pass off either a kettle sour or a quicker sour as, a lambic or a Flanders red or something that it's more than likely not. So there are three types of fast turnaround techniques. There's a kettle souring, which is souring in a kettle, like a boil kettle. And then you have pre-fermentation souring, which is done outside the kettle, but it's still before you pitch your yeast or Brettanomyces. And then you have post-fermentation style, which is you let your yeast and or Brettanomyces start off, and then you pitch your souring bacteria. So the first thing is kettle souring. I'm sure that's what most people have experience with. So that's where you would brew a beer like normal, except when you get to your boil kettle, you do a short boil, run it through a heat exchanger, come back into your kettle at around 90 degrees, and then you pitch your souring bacteria. So this is mostly done with lactobacillus cultures, but there's also starting to come out some quicker turnaround pedio cultures, which I don't know if you guys went to Jeff Mello's talk, but he has this Pediococcus P blend that I've used a few times, and it's very quick turnaround. I have some numbers on that on a later slide that I'll show you. Usually with this technique, we can get to an acidity level of under what we call sour beer, around like 3.7 or below, in 12 to 48 hours. And that is basically due to giving the lacto an optimal temperature for it to have the fastest growth rate, and then drop the pH quickly. This also, kettle souring is great because you're pasteurizing the wort before it goes into any of your equipment. I've done a lot of consulting for breweries, and usually they start with this because usually ownership and management is more risk adverse of adding any type of bread or bacteria to their fermentation side, their cold side. So we'll usually start with something like this and then test it out in a tap room, and if it still go well, they usually move on to different techniques. Our other thing is pre-fermentation souring. So sour or wort souring is what we call So again, usually lactobacillus, but you can also do pediococcus. So this would be something like going from doing your normal brew and then moving into another tank or straight into your fermentation tank and then doing like a souring in that tank that's not the boil kettle. So these products are not pasteurized, so you gotta remember that for the sanitation purposes. And what we have to do with this is when you do kettle sours, you're not adding hops before you add the lactobacillus or your pedio, so we do have to watch that both lactobacillus and pediococcus can be really sensitive to hops, the IBUs specifically, and we have to watch that. Again, optimal temperature is what's going to get us the fastest turnaround time. One technique that's can be used with this is lowering the pH of your wort before you sour to 4 to 4.3, and that gives you a little bit of head retention, and it also just discourages like contaminating bacteria. So if you didn't, this goes with the kettle sour too, is if you didn't sanitize your boil kettle completely, you can kind of get some nasty stuff working. So this kind of discourages some of that. One thing you have to think about with pre-fermentation souring is if you drop the pH before you pitch your Saccharomyces or Brettanomyces, it kind of deadens the yeast character. So that's why there's also post-fermentation souring. This is allowing Saccharomyces and Brettanomyces to get a head start. And then you pitch your souring bacteria. And this is kind of seen as more of the traditional way, and I know kind of modern brewing is going towards the other way of kettle souring for a faster turnaround sour. But you get way more yeast character with doing post-fermentation sours. And you also get better head retention because of the natural pH drop during your fermentation. And in my opinion, it creates more, like a more complex beer. So one thing you have to worry about with post-fermentation souring is if you pitch your bacteria too late, it can cause a less sour beer. So you're not having as much sugar for the lactic acid bacteria to get a hold of. And also, again, not pasteurized, so you have to take that in consideration with your cleaning techniques. So here's a little slide of the difference between pre-acidification and not acidifying. So this left side, it was not acidified before it was fermented. So yeah, this kettle sour technique, the right-hand side was after pre-acidifying, so you get quite a bit of head retention difference. So that's one thing. Yeast before lacto, the head stays intact though. So
is that the next shirt?
Yeah. Word production. Fast turnaround sours are a product of a beer's recipe, the microbe selection, and your fermentation conditions. So what we're trying to do is give our yeast and bacteria the optimal conditions for them to ferment as fast as possible. So what we'd like to look for is a lower ABV if we're going for a really fast turnaround, somewhere between 4 and 6%. You want to make the wort as fermentable as possible. So some ways you do that is a low mash temperature using highly modified malts. Like any modern malt really that converts pretty fast will work. And then you can use like adjuncts like sugar or honey just for that like quick source. And then again, consider your hop tolerance of your LAB. For most lactose strains, over 5 IBU is too much for them. Like especially with like plantarum, it can like 2 IBU will kill that or slow it down. And then you can also think of things like using like wheat, which provides a little bit of ferulic acid, which Brett will turn into that barnyard, horsey, like really spicy flavors. And then also doing a mash rest around 100 Fahrenheit will produce that. Microbe selection. So our main point in this is how we get our beers to turn around faster is we are controlling the entire process. And when those bacteria and yeast come in and not leaving it up to nature, like if you do like a lambic style where you're just like leaving it open, everything's kind of all at once in small numbers and then kind of grows on its own. We're timing each yeast and bacteria to give it like an optimal growing rate. So we're not doing the pitch and pray method, as I call it, where you dump in a barrel, then you order a lacto, a Brett, and a sack, and you just pour it in a barrel and hope in 12 months it comes out. So with the fast-acting lactic strains, we can get under that 3.5 pH range in 1 to 7 days. So a lot faster than if you're doing like a full-on long-conditioned sour. Another thing is to get that faster turnaround, we can use strains that ferment a little bit faster and hotter. So if you're looking at like a French Saison, 3711, like any type of Belgian strain that ferments really fast. And I've started messing around with this hothead right here. That's from Omega Yeast Labs. And so that'll ferment at 90 degrees Fahrenheit without any funky flavors. So you can pitch that with lacto at 90, and you can hit a pH and ferment out very, very quickly. Also with these, we want to err on the side of over pitching. So we're kind of looking at pitching at lager rates to kind of help it out. So lactobacillus, this is what I usually use to drop my pH in these faster turnaround sours. Just like yeast, lacto has a wide range of flavor contribution depending on strain. So you kind of got to figure out what lactose you like and the flavor contributions they have, and give them all kinds of just different tries. And then with a lot of these beers, you hear people say like, oh, they're not very complex beers, but you have to look at what they're kind of talking about, and usually they're talking about kettle sour beer that has 1 lacto, and then it's fermented with USO5, and then served. So you start doing kind of the blends, and then using blends of sack strains with Bretts, you can kind of create a more complex product. Lacto, again, we got to drive the point home, is can be very, very hop sensitive, because I've had a lot of brewers that are like, we've been souring for 7 days and our pH hasn't dropped. It's like, what's going on? And it's like, well, how many IBUs do you use? And they'll be like, oh, we use 30 IBUs like our regular, like our regular beers. And it's like, well, you just killed your lacto there. Also, lactobacillus can grow under anaerobic conditions, but it also can grow with oxygen. So that's kind of important. There's kind of a big myth going around that if you give lacto oxygen, it creates this butyric acid, which is the vomit flavor that you get in some of these kettle sours, but that's not coming from a lacto. That's coming from some other contamination issue. And a lot of people will purge their kettles to kind of keep that from happening, but the bacteria that creates that product is an anaerobic bacteria, so it's going to ferment without oxygen. So another thing is you cannot fully attenuate wort with lactobacillus. So if you've ever heard of 100% lacto beer, that doesn't exist. If you're getting any signs of fermentation when you pitch lacto, like bubbling or any CO2 production, you're more than likely you have a sign of infection there. So we talked about like optimal temperature. You can kind of look at here. On this one here, we have a change at 98 degrees and then a change at 108. When I first started brewing these kind of beers, I think the conventional wisdom out was pitch lacto as hot as you can and then kind of let it, and the hotter the better. Well, if you look at these graphs, like Plantarum here, 20 hours at 98 degrees, it's hitting down here at almost 3 pH. But if you're at 108, you're down here at 3.5 in the same time. So that's another reason when I have brewers that are like, oh, I've been souring for 3 days and I don't have the pH I want. Why is that? A lot of times we ask them, they're running at 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So we have to know the optimal temperature for our bacteria to get these fast changes. Pediococcus, this is kind of like in the newer range of stuff. I only have a couple beers that I've done a fast style with pedio, and again, using this bootleg biology blend. So these are straight from Jeff here. At 98 degrees Fahrenheit, you can get a 3.3 pH in 18 hours, which is pretty quick. And then lower, it's a little bit slower. And then terminals around 3.1. So if you want to do something with pedio, I would consult the manufacturer and try to figure out how fast their pedios can drop. And another thing you have to worry about with pediococcus is the beer is getting sick or ropey, which is kind of like a snotty flavor, and like you pour it out and it kind of looks like shampoo. So, but also Brettanomyces can break down that snotty flavor over time, but you're going to be waiting, 6 months for it to clear out. Brettanomyces, I think most people are familiar with this. So when we do Brett beers, we have to think about, there's two different ways. You can either primary ferment with only Brettanomyces, which gives you like a cleaner flavor profile, or you can do pitching after Saccharomyces, which gives you your more funkier profiles. You can think about using your Saccharomyces strains, these phenol positive strains, so that's like your Saison strains, your wheat strains, and they create this uric acid that Brettanomyces is going to turn into the barnyard flavor that we're all looking for. And again, wheat in your mash, rest around 110, that's all going to increase that. So Saccharomyces, we all know, what we want to look for is a faster fermenting Saccharomyces. So US-05, French Saison, Belle Saison, even some of your 1056 and stuff like that, usually they work pretty well in these low pHs. So what I look for when I do my beers is something that goes really quick. So I usually tend towards this like Belle Saison side of things, and I can drop our gravity down to a point to where if I pitch Brettanomyces, I know it's not going to create a bottle bomb. So if we're getting down to like 1 or 0 Plato, then you don't have to worry as much about bottle bombs. If you're going to bottle condition these, you can consider using like a champagne yeast, and there's also methods to acclimate champagne yeast or any type of yeast to low pH beer. So what you would do is you take your normal growth medium and you can mix it 1-to-1 with the sour beer that you're going to carbonate, and then use that as your growth medium for your bottling strain, and that'll kind of condition it to the low pH, and then you pitch that in and you'll have a lot better fermentation. Flavoring and adjuncts, you can do anything. So main thing is to experiment with all this stuff. So if you want to do like fruits or fruit juices, spices, dry hops, coffee, put it in a barrel, like all that is being done right now. So the thing you want to kind of take away from this is you want to make the wort as fermentable as possible to get your quick turnaround, and then control the phases of microbial activity. And again, we want to create clean and complex sours, and we do that by knowing your microbes. And I'll kind of say this, to have fun with it and be hyper experimental, and it'll create your best product. And for more info on like any of the strains and stuff, we have our website, Milk the Funk Wiki, and then our group is just Milk the Funk on Facebook, where you can ask like any question and you'll probably get 100 responses.
It'll also check the wiki.
Yeah, check the wiki. So I kind of open the floor up for questions now. Just kind of want to run through real quick and then talk to you guys. Yeah.
What was the beer that made both of you guys fall in love with sour beers?
Well, I started working at a retail shop, and we had cantions on the shelf at that point, if you could believe that, like pretty much every product, and just going through those. And then I guess what got me into brewing sour beer is a Berliner Weiss that Brandon made, and sent to me. I drank it, and I'm like, oh, you know, you can make this stuff at home, and that's kind of what kicked off my sour beer brewing.
For me, it was New Belgium Lafayette. And by the way, I'm mostly here for moral support, or to answer any questions. One thing I wanted to add that I thought was kind of interesting is you might be asking yourself, why would you co-ferment lacto in Saccharomyces cerevisiae instead of just doing a kettle sour? Because it's not completely obvious. But a new study recently came out that showed that there's a big difference actually if you use sour mash, kettle sour, or co-ferment. You'll actually, that there's some sort of interaction between the bacteria and the yeast that's unknown. And this is the case for a lot of mixed fermentation. People don't really know how one affects the other. Saccharomyces affects Brettanomyces. But anyway, the point I'm making is that you'll get a completely different product if you co-ferment versus kettle sour, even if you're using the same microbes.
If you're doing that, you still need to be worried about the IBUs.
Yes. Yeah, IBUs are always going to be a problem there.
Yeah, we have some charts on our website about like hop tolerances of different lactose species, and you can also talk to your manufacturer, like Omega or Bootleg or Y Yeast or whoever you get from, and ask them what the hop tolerance is. You kind of want to err on the low side too, because sometimes I think they give you a higher number than what's actually they ferment well at.
One thing you can do to get around that problem is dry hop, because obviously you guys have to, have this, at least this, I don't know what the amount is off the top of my head, but there's I think it's
legal limit.
Yeah, there's a federal limit there, minimum. And you can also use dry hopping to stop the souring as well, if you're trying to target a certain pH.
Good.
I might have missed it. So there's like a 12 to 48 hours or so for kettle sour. Is that about the same time if you co-ferment?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, and it depends on when you pitch your lacto. So, I like to give. I always use saison strains usually, and they start kicking off like a very active fermentation, around 70 degrees. But then I'll pitch my lacto on top of that, and then by the time it takes 3711 to fully ferment out, your pH is going to be dropped. So,
but you do stagger them like that most of the time?
If you want to get that like more like a saison style with all the yeast phenolics, yeah, that's what I try to do. A lot of the beers I've been doing lately have been, like I said, a saison strain and a Brettanomyces pitched right off the bat in pretty high levels, like a lager rate, and I get that really active fermentation. I just give it like a day or so, and then I pitch my souring bacteria on top of that, and it's leave it in a primary fermenter, and then go off into somehow package it and then package.
Well, then let's say you didn't want that phenolic in, like a Berliner Weiss.
Right.
Would you still stagger them, or you would?
You can do co-pitching. It's kind of like if you pre-sour, it's going to be like almost no phenolics. Even pitching like 3711, like I don't get like any of that saison character. It's like almost like clean. You would think it's like a USO5 or something.
Right.
The mix kind of gives you like kind of in between, and then if you wait, it's the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
More questions, comments, or experiences?
When you do that, you're pitching Brett and Sack at what rates? Are you still pitching both the same rate?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they're giving them the 24 hours or whatever to kind of kickstart themselves.
I know there's different brewers like to do it different ways, but I do like some brewers will pitch a very small amount of Brettanomyces compared to Saccharomyces, but I do like to kind of find a Brett that pairs with the saison strain and pitch them at the same rate, and really give them that get an active fermentation.
I've never done a double pitch, but I've always heard that the Brett was half whatever your
You can, yeah.
is. And so that's what you said, you pitched them both at the same time.
Right.
I didn't know if it
Well, when you pitch Brettanomyces, it's kind of a slower fermenter, so it's going to take a little bit longer to kick off. So what's going to happen is your sack is going to start fermenting, and then your bread's going to kind of kick in after. It's like a little bit slower of a fermenter.
And then you said you throw lacto on top of that?
Yeah, it is the third step for that one.
About how long do you wait? Do you just check your?
So I just let it kind of start getting fermenting. It's like a couple days. Yeah. Brandon?
I was going to ask you what you thought the biggest mistake that first time brewers with this process would make.
Well, definitely hop sensitivity. I think, every beer you've ever brewed ever that's not this style, you add hops to. So that's something you have to worry about. And I think a lot of people just don't think it's possible to brew like a faster sour beer. They kind of get in their heads that the only way to make sour beer is to make lambic, so it's kind of learning your microbes and like what you want to use and how they like to ferment, and kind of let the microbes tell you how to make the beer, and then you kind of create the beer to appease the microbes and how they like to go.
I guess the other one would be heat. That's the other one where we're doing the milk to funk page. People fermented just too.
Like 120, because the first sour beer I ever did, I pitched lacto at 120 because that's just what the internet told me to do. There wasn't really any of the studies about optimal temperature. So yeah, the hotter is not always better.
And the other thing about temperature is, at least the case of plantarum, is that you don't really need to control the temperature. The temperature can drop and you'll be just fine, and you don't have to treat it like these.
We go back, to the slide, the pH changes. So yeah, if you look, selecting a fast-acting lacto or PDO is what you need to look at. Because if you look at like lacto D, you're still way up here, even after 120 hours. And I think that's where brewers kind of get frustrated, is they go to White Labs or something and get like a Del Breckerai, and they expect it to kettle sour in a few days, and their kettle's been tied up for 4 weeks or 4 days, and they're just frustrated that it's not below 4 pH, so you definitely need to find strains that facilitate a faster souring. So yeah, Burritos is a good one, Plantarum's a good one. Omega sells a very good blend of, I can't remember the exact, but it's 3 different lactos. And then Jeff from Bootleg sells some blends that work pretty fast too. Any more questions? All right.
You guys covered pretty good. And like I said, most of the stuff you can find on the wiki.
Right. And we'll be having a Q&A tomorrow with Brandon and Jeff. So if anybody thinks of any questions from them, they can ask it tomorrow. Oh, go ahead.
Got one comment.
Okay.
I'm for the page and everything, and I can't stress enough how awesome of a tool what you guys do is.
Oh, thank you.
I mean,
I appreciate it.
We're on the brink, building free in-depth sour program, and all of that research is all from sites, from
That's awesome. Awesome.
So it's an awesome resource.
Yeah, we're trying to be more almost like a classroom setting. Like I've said this before, but we want our wiki to kind of be like the textbook, and then the Facebook page is kind of like the classroom discussion. So all the boring, really sciencey stuff is on the wiki, where if you want to find anything about any species of lacto or bread or anything, it's on there, and then all the application stuff is in the page. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, you guys are killing me.
Yeah, thanks.
As long as you don't talk about cars. And it's not on the page anymore.